One of my coaching clients has an event they do every year. They feed about 20 or so, maybe 20,000, I think was the number last year. They haven't seen total numbers this year. They were guessing around 25,000. Homeless people, people who are living right on the edge of poverty, people who are struggling just to survive, those ones that if you just have a blowout, your whole financial world becomes ruined because you're so close to not making it that any small thing means you don't make it. And in the first year that this organization opened their doors, they had a plan to do an event. And the event date was coming up. And they had only had one donation up to that date. Now, the founder and the president of this organization tell the story over and over. I know the story because they are a coaching client of mine. I help write the speeches for their fundraisers and a lot of their direct mail and media. I consult on their media stuff and I serve on their advisory board. So I'm really familiar with the story. The whole story is pretty elaborate and it's pretty powerful. If you want to see or read the whole thing, you can go to Operation Care. I believe it's opcare.org or operationcare.org. You can find it either way online. But I want to give you the nutshell of the story because it leads into what I want to talk about today from the standpoint of character as we prepare ourselves for the future. One of the challenges that we have as humans is blind spots. We all have blind spots. And so in this particular illustration or story that I want to share with you, there is a event coming up. The date has been set. The location has been chosen. The amount of expense necessary just to meet the minimum has already been identified. And what has been donated so far is nowhere close. I mean, not even remotely close to what it's going to take to pull off this event. And they're basically in the midnight hour of what it's going to take to logistically pull this off. If the funds were there, they're like right on the deadline of, now that we have the money, we've got to do all of these things in this short period of time to be able to pull this off. And one more day would mean we're not going to have the time to pull it off, even if we did have the money. And the founder tells the story, and I believe it's in her book, 31 Mountaintop Miracles as well. Susie talks about the time that she realized we are at that place where if we don't have the right amount of money at the right time, this whole event is a bust. And not only is it a bust, but we're letting down a lot of people that we had promised to help. And we're making ourselves look pretty bad because we made this promise that we were going to do this and nothing's going to happen instead. And she said, I fell on my face before God, and the only thing I could think to say was, God, it's not my name on the line. My reputation will be okay. It's yours. It's your name that's on the line because we told them God was going to come through, that Jesus was going to provide for backpacks, for school supplies, for food for these homeless people, that God was going to do that for them. And if it doesn't happen, I'm going to look like a fool, but even more so, my God. And in the 11th hour, the funds came through. Now, the details of that story are absolutely fascinating. How that came about will blow your mind. Grab a copy of 31 Mountaintop Miracles by Susie Jennings and look for the story about the first donor to Operation Care almost 12, 13 years ago now. It's a pretty incredible story. But I want you to focus for a moment on the relationship that we have between our plans, our commitment, as we're going into a new season, a new opportunity to plan, to lay out our goals, to lay out our ideas in front of the world and say, this is what I want to do. Now, if you listen to anybody like Michael Hyatt or John Maxwell or Seth Godin or Tony Robbins who talk about building your plans for the future, you've got to have a vision for those things. You've got to have smart goals for those things. But every one of them tell you to do two things. Number one, write it down so that you can look back at it later and say, yes, I accomplished it or no, I didn't. And share it with someone so that you can be held accountable. Now, our challenge is when we come up with these big, boisterous, flamboyant plans that require a lot of funds and a lot of ideas, they're great for motivating us because they will drive us to do things we could never have imagined. John Maxwell says it all the time. If your dream isn't big enough to scare you, it isn't big enough. And if it isn't big enough to demand other people help you to do it, it isn't big enough. So you've got to stretch your expectations. You've got to stretch your want to. You've got to stretch your abilities. You've got to go beyond what you can do on your own. On your own is the key to that. Because if you can accomplish it on your own, it's not a very big deal. If you can accomplish it on your own, you have no dependence on anybody else. One of the notions that came to mind yesterday was me realizing that in the progression of my own spiritual maturity, God has been taking me through this season to understand what obedience looks like. Now, that's hard for a lot of people in leadership. Leaders don't like to be subservient. Leaders don't like to obey. Leaders don't like to be under authority because that means they're not leaders, right? No, wrong. Good leaders know what it means to be under authority. Good leaders know they're not the highest authority. They're just the best influencer at the level they are. That's their role. So what does this have to do with God, your name is on the line? Well, I want to take you to a passage in Ezekiel chapter 36. And again, it's pretty long, but it's very descriptive of our relationship to obedience, to God's name being on the line, and then the next level of maturity when it comes to planning and goal setting and goal getting. We can set our goals, we can have our plans, we can have our vision, we can build our dream team around us, we can invest in our character and our moral character and our strength. We can build all of the business plans and all of the financial plans and set all the financial goals and develop the logistics and the standard operating procedures down to a T. But if obedience doesn't thread through that, then we are doing it on our own. Even with a team of 1,000 people, we're doing it on our own. Why? Because ultimately, obedience means doing not what we thought was a great idea, but what God thought was a great idea. If you want to get the people behind what you're doing, bear fruit. Show evidence of what you're doing. No one wants to hire a coach who's a failure. People want to hire a coach who succeeded at what they're doing. No one wants to hire. Look at the NFL right now. How many coaches are losing their jobs because they've had either over their career losing records or over this season losing records? Or quarterbacks with losing records, or wide receivers with no catches. No one wants to hire that person. People want to hire the superstar, the one who's accomplished everything, the one who said, I'm going to go do this, and they went and did that. And it's the same in our faith relationship to our God. And I don't care who your God is. The god Dagon at one time stood face to face in the Philistine army camp, in the temple. When the Philistines stole the Ark of the Covenant from the Hebrews, they put it in the same temple with the Dagon god. And when they came back the next day, Dagon, the fish god, his hands were broken off. And the next day, his head was broken off. And the next day, his feet were broken off. And they found him laying face down on his floor. The statue bowed down face to face to the Ark of the Covenant. So I don't care who your God is, the God of the Hebrews or Dagon or whomever else. But if your God is supposed to be backing up your plans, then your plans better be in line with your God. That makes good sense, doesn't it? If you want some external help, then you better be in line with whatever that external help is. So chapter 36 of Ezekiel, he says, therefore tell Israel, message of God, the Master, I'm not doing this for you, Israel. I'm doing it for me, to save my character, my holy name, which you have blackened in every country where you've gone. I'm going to put a great and holy name on display, the name that has been ruined in so many countries, the name that you blackened wherever you went. The nations will realize who I really am, that I am God, when I show my holiness through you, so that they can see it with their own eyes. For here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you out of these countries, gather you from all over, and bring you back to your own land. I'll pour pure water over you, and I'll scrub you clean. I'll give you a new heart. I'll put a new spirit in you. I'll remove the heart of stone from your body and replace it with a heart that is God-willed, not self-willed. I will replace it with a heart that is God-willed, not self-willed. I'll put my spirit in you and make it possible for you to do what I tell you to do and to live by my commands. You'll once again live in the land I gave your ancestors. You'll be my people. I'll be your God. I'll pull you out of the stinking that stinking pollution. I'll give you personal orders. I will give personal orders to the wheat fields, telling them to grow bumper crops. I'll send no more famines. I'll make sure your fruit trees and field crops flourish. Other nations won't be able to hold you in contempt again because of famine. And then you'll think back over your terrible lives, the evil, the shame, and be thoroughly disgusted with yourselves, realizing how badly you've lived, all those obscenities you've carried out. I'm not doing this for your sake. Get this through your thick heads. Shame on you. What a mess you've made of things, Israel. The message of God, the Master. On the day I scrub you from all your filthy living, I'll also make your cities livable. The ruins will be rebuilt. The neglected land will be worked again, no longer overgrown with weeds and thistles, worthless in the eyes of passers-by. People will exclaim, Why, this weed patch has been turned into a Garden of Eden. And the ruined cities, smashed into oblivion, are now thriving. The nations around you that are still in existence will realize that I, God, rebuild ruins and replant empty waste places. I, God, said so, and I'll do it. The message of God the Master, yet again, I'm going to do what Israel asks. I'll increase the population like a flock of sheep, like the milling flocks of sheep brought for sacrifices in Jerusalem during the appointed feast. The ruined cities will be filled with flocks of people, and they'll realize that I'm God. Now, the very next story behind this in Scripture is the story that we call the Valley of the Dry Bones, where the prophet is asked, in fact, it says the Spirit took him up and set him down in the middle of an open plain of dry bones. And in this plain, God asks a very specific question. Is it possible for those dry bones to live again? And I'm sure this conversation that he's just had with God about Israel and the future of Israel and how they have blackened the name of God by their disobedience. They've blackened the name of God by being self-sufficient. They've blackened the name of God by being, in his words, self-willed and not God-willed. He said, I'm going to break you. I'm going to change you. I'm going to scrub you clean. I'm going to give you a new heart so that you will be God-willed and not self-willed. And the next thing he sees is a valley of dry bones. Dead, useless, bleached by the sun, no life in them at all. And God asks a very pointed question. Prophet, can these bones live again? I'm asking you right now, when you look back on 2016, on the previous year, is it possible for those dry bones to live again? Have all the declarations and the promises and the commitments and the plans and the visions and the goals and the dreams that you had, are they all fulfilled? Do you look back and say, look what God has done in my life over the last year? Or do you look back and say, look at everything I set out to do and how it hasn't worked? Did it not work because it was your plan and God wasn't in it? Did it not work because you didn't put the intention and the effort and the discipline and the diligence into it that was necessary? Did it not work because you didn't have the funding? It didn't work because you didn't have the right timing? It didn't work because you didn't have the right people? Or is it in the process of working? See, I don't know the answers to those questions, but you better be asking them. You better be asking them. And if my life is an illustration and you want to learn something from it, in this season what I've learned is obedience. I've learned obedience. And the next season, I'm learning dependence. I'm not looking forward to that one. I can already see the markers. I can see the writing on the wall, if you will. I come into the idea of learning about full dependence on God with a little bit of fear and trembling. Okay, I'm lying. A whole lot of fear and trembling. Obedience has been a tough year. That's been a tough thing to relearn. I thought I had it. I was wrong. Dependence, it's a whole new ball game. I've always been self-sufficient. I've always been the guy to say, so I need another $2,000 or $3,000 to meet budget for this month. I'll go find $2,000 or $3,000. I can do this. It's not a big deal for me. I've always been a good communicator. I've always been persuasive. I've always been willing to do whatever it takes. If that means mowing lawns, chopping firewood, clearing land, taping someone else's videos, I don't care. If the budget says I need X amount of money, I'll find a way to make X amount of money. And God's always given me the talent and the skill to do that. But now what he's saying to me is I need you to be focused on what I've called you to do. God-willed, not self-willed. And in the gaps, not to be self-sufficient, but to learn to be dependent. Man, that goes against everything I am. I find ways around, I find workarounds, I find shortcuts, I find how to get it done. I'm a get it done kind of guy. And when God says, rest, I got this. I'll tell the fields to bear fruit. I'll tell the wheat fields to have a bumper crop. I, God, will do that. That's my job. It's my name that's on the line. You've done enough to blacken my character. You've done enough to make me look like a fool. Now it's time for you to be obedient and dependent and let me take care of the rest. What a frightening place to be, right? No. It's only frightening because I depend on myself too much. I depend on my flesh too much. I depend on my own skills, talent, character, education, learning too much. Going into this next year, I intend to blend the character God's been developing in me over the last 5 or 6 years with the obedience that I've learned in this year, and I'm still learning. I still have a long way to go. And to marry all of that together with dependence on God that says, okay, I'm going to stand right here, and if it means my pant legs catch on fire before I move, I will let my pant legs catch on fire before I move because I'm waiting on God to do whatever it is that's next. Whatever he tells me to do, that's where I'll go. Whatever he lays in front of me, that's the task I'll take on. Are you that brave yet? Are you ready? Are you ready for a new year? Have you laid your own will down, your own plans down? Have you laid your own character down to say, make me into the who that you want me to be? Teach me to obey your word, your spirit, to be led to a valley of dry bones if that's what you want. Teach me to be dependent on your ability to make fruit trees bear fruit, to make populations grow, to make wheat fields into bumper crops, to make customers show up at my door, to make business seem fruitful, productive, to give me opportunity. Are you willing to ask those questions? Are you willing to surrender those things as you come into this new year of opportunity? I think there's a lot on the horizon. And I think there are a lot of people looking at their horizon. And they're seeing the same thing, but they're seeing it with different perspectives. One of the stories in the John Maxwell series, I can't remember exactly which book it's from, but he talks about a man walking down a road. And as he's walking down the road, he comes on an old man sitting on the side of the road, and he says, so what are the people like in that town? He said, well, what were the people like in the town you came from? Oh, they were generous to a fault. They were sweet. They were lovable. They were industrious and hardworking, compassionate, merciful people. I loved it. I hated to leave there. He said, that's what you will find in the town ahead of you. Shortly after that, another man walks by. He asked the same old man on the side of the road, so what are the people like in this town I'm coming to? He said, well, what were the people like in the town you left? He said, they were despicable. I didn't like them at all. They were mean. They were rude. They were hateful. They were stingy. I couldn't wait to get out of there. He said, then that's what you will find in the next town. The reality is we stand looking into a horizon of the future. Some see the sun rising over a great land of opportunity, a great season of opportunity, over the blessings of God being poured out on humanity. Others see the sun setting and darkness coming. It's the same sun, my friend. The question is your perspective. Is it right? Is it lined up? Or do you have an opinion of something that's not in line with reality. It's totally up to you. But how you treat the coming year and how you choose to be obedient, how you choose to surrender your character, how you choose to be shaped and molded, how you choose to be dependent or independent will all be driven by the perspective that you have on who God is in the world and in your life. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.